Hi guys, this video is for Tuesday, March the 24th. I had to check really quickly. And we are now in the continent of Africa. We're finishing up. So today is the last day of discussion. Tomorrow would have been a review chapter or to review everything, and then you would have had a test. But since everything's different now, you're not going to have a test. So after today, we'll go right into the next chapter rather than the review. So on the lesson plan, you can just skip the review. We're going to go right into the next one. But so we're talking a little bit about the conquest. I was going to tell you the pages. You guys are actually pages 277 to 279, I believe. 277 to 279. And but just a review, we talked a little bit about colonialism. Colonialism is the conquest of one or more nations by another nation. And then imperialism, which has been our topic, is the dominance and power asserted by one nation over less powerful nations. So we're talking, about England going into Africa, France, Portugal, all these countries trying to take over these little African nations, okay? So yesterday, 2 days ago, we talked a little bit about the phases of these countries, okay? You remember phase 1, treaties signed between African tribes and European countries. Few understood what they were signing. Some African rulers refused to sign. And then you had phase 2, where European nations worked out agreements among themselves. That was called the Berlin Conference. And then, oops, my thing went away. And then phase 3 is when they brought in all the ships and all the armies to take over. Okay, ships arrived, submission, because they didn't have the armies to fight back, so they had full resistance. And then the alliance, though, they didn't offer any protection to the Africans, even though they came and said, we'll help you, we'll do all this stuff. Nada, that didn't happen. Okay. So, and then yesterday we talked a little bit about the pros and cons of the political aspect of this, and we talked, we said it was peace and stability, but it was at a price. They lost their freedom. The formation of new African states, they drew boundaries, were drawn arbitrarily, so they didn't have a say in how they wanted to split up the regions. You had the development of political organizations. They built up judicial systems, bureaucracies, and civil servants. They had professional armies, but this later became a chronic source of the problem because they didn't really teach them how to fight well. And then delayed development, no experience in self-government. I use the example, if you live at home and your parents make decisions for you now, but when you go into college or you become 25 or 30 as an adult and your parents are still making decisions for you, then there's a problem with that, because you need to learn how to live life in the real world. And as far as, my son is going to be 20 in April, and to me, he's still my baby boy. He's an adult, complete adult, and so there's times where I still want to be the mama and tell him what to do. I don't really tell him what to do. He'll ask me for advice and things like that, but I still, when he's at home, he's still nice enough to let me know where he's going. He doesn't have to, but out of respect for me and that I don't worry, because I still worry, he'll tell me, like, I'm going to go meet a friend or something like that. So the England and stuff made these choices for these African people, but they didn't have any idea how to live in the real world, how to fend for themselves. Now remember, Africa is known as the Dark Continent because there's so much we don't know about it. It was hidden from the world. Okay, today we're going to talk about the economic part of it and the modern infrastructure. Infrastructure is like when you take something and you build, whether it be like building a railroad system or water system or things like that that can benefit. They would help these African countries around here, and they would build railroads and make railroads for them, or they would build buildings, but only in certain areas and only if it benefited the European countries. Nothing was done in regards to the African people. They benefited from it, but if you lived in a rural part of Africa or a landlocked area, you didn't have the benefits of some of the railroads and some of the things. Another thing though, it improved farming methods, it increased production. This was one of the economic benefits or the pros to it, and the understanding of the value of land. Hopefully you've read your section review yet. If you haven't, pause it and then read. I think I already told you what pages to read from, so just make sure that you read this so that you can understand. And then another positive thing is it replaced the barter-based economy. Barter is when you go to someplace and you kind of like, you know, this is going to be $10. No, I don't want to spend $10. What about $5? Another person says, no, not $5. How about $7? And you kind of like negotiate a price. That's barter control. And then, but it changed that kind of economy with a money-based economy. And it also gave a banking system. So those are some of the positive things that happened with the economic part of Africa. And then the negative was an uneven economic development. It wasn't the same throughout Africa. It wasn't fair. I mean, some parts of Africa benefited better than others. Some were just left to fend for themselves, maybe because they were little and they lived in a town where it didn't matter, okay? I always think about like an example. If you were to take maybe San Jose or San Francisco, a lot of things were happening there. But then if you take a little town like San Martin and leave it to itself, it's not gonna be as important to some people as it would be to the people who live in San Martin and who love that little city. It's more, San Martin is more farming industry and stuff like that. It doesn't have a lot of technology like San Jose and San Francisco. Then, and then another negative is the denial of opportunity to develop industry and technology. Cash crops were grown rather than food crops. Cash crops meant that they would make these farmers get their food, and then they would have to sell it at a certain price. Whereas most of them just grew food so that their family can eat it. It was just for their family. And so these people that would grow this stuff were lacking nutrients that they needed because they had to give away their food source. And then it was an end of inter-African trade, another thing. And then European investors often took their wealth back to Europe. So they would make money off these cash crops or these, you know, the bartering and things like that with African people, or the sources that they got from Africa, and then they would take it back to Europe rather than invest it back into the country and to help that particular African city or African town or village grow. And then the social aspects of this was the positive. There was a significant population growth, urbanization grew, The spread of religion and education was a good thing. More people came in, more missionaries came in, and when the missionaries came in to spread the gospel, that they were also allowing education. They would teach. A lot of these missionaries would become school teachers as well. And new social order based on merit and achievement. You work hard, you do your best, this is gonna benefit you. But the negative part of this is that there was a large gap between the rural and the urban areas. Like I said, urban would be more of the city, rural would be more of the farming people. And for some reason, they always thought that the people in the city could benefit more. So the infrastructure, or these different kind of buildings and the railroads and the water system and everything, mainly was built in the urban part of Africa rather than the rural part. Another negative thing on social was they downgraded the status of women. This has been the same thing throughout history, not just in Africa, but women were not looked upon as important. They couldn't vote, they couldn't have jobs, and if they did have jobs, they didn't get paid the same as the African men. That was something. And then the disruption of cultural development. They, their culture that they had was soon not as important as others anymore. Because Europe, like I said, even though they had help, it came as a price. Some people lost their lives. Africans lost their lives for the freedom that they wanted, and we don't see a growth from that. So Africa has suffered a lot over the years, but thankfully, it's still developing, but it's come a long way, and missionaries are still going there, spreading the gospel, which is the most important thing for people. If you have any questions over this particular lesson, go ahead and text me. Don't forget, I've said this before, a lot of people are still confused. You do not have to do the activity manual. All you have to do is send me 2 or 3 sentences of something that you learned, whether it's something that I talked about or something that you read, and then you can text it to me or you can email me. If you use never mind, don't worry about anything. Just go ahead and do that. If you haven't done it last week, just start from today and then go on from here. That way I know that you're actually learning something and that you're paying attention. There's no tests or quizzes, so these are the only way I can keep track of how to grade you. Okay? I miss you guys. I hope you're doing well. Bye.